Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Good evening, I'm Amanda Kinsley-Smith. Thank you for joining me on the Sunday Late Show here on Teachers Talk Radio. It's Sunday the 21st of July 2024 and my guest tonight is Cathy McAllister, English teacher and literacy coordinator in a post-primary school here in Northern Ireland. Cathy and I will be talking about why it can be just as ambitious to choose to stay in the classroom throughout your career rather than moving up and out into management and school leadership.
This is Teachers Talk Radio and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Okay, welcome to the show. As I said, I'm going to be talking to Cathy about career paths and how staying in the classroom does not necessarily indicate a lack of ambition, as some people might sometimes sort of give that impression. So I thought I'd start by talking about my own non-linear path in my career so far. I've been teaching for 14 years. I was on one teaching allowance, one additional point as we call them here, for doing the school's community volunteering programme for sixth formers. I then applied for and got the head of department role. I'm an English teacher, so that was English language and literature, and literacy coordinator, so that was a big old 3-pointer. And the rule at that time was that if you were on 4 points, that automatically co-opted you into the senior leadership team. So I was on SLT for 2 years. Once I was then permanently appointed, the HOD and LitCo roles, the rules at the time were that you could only be on 3 points, so I had to give up my community service point, brought me back to 3, so that was the end of SLT, except they then invited me to stay on for another 6 months. So I spent 2.5 years on the senior leadership team before then moving back into middle leadership with the head of department and literacy. So it was a bit of a strange move, I suppose, in a way. It didn't go completely the straight path up the ladder that is signposted as the way that you might expect at the beginning of your career to go. Although, to be honest, I never intended moving up that ladder in the first place. I wanted to become a teacher to become a teacher. The other thing is my head of department, when I started teaching, very clearly told me, as she told every new member of the team, that if I wanted to progress up through school leadership in the school, to take the pastoral route, because I would have to take the head of department, they would have to take it from her cold, dead hands, were her words. I'm very pleased to report she is not dead. I'm meeting her for coffee tomorrow. But she did eventually decide that she wanted to step down and focus on teaching. And so that's what she did. And I became head of department at that point. So having moved them back from SLT, I've struggled a bit sometimes to decide what I want my next steps to be. Do I want to go back to looking at SLT posts, knowing full well that I would either have to retain my current role, which I know I would find difficult to balance, or take a new challenge, maybe move elsewhere, maybe look at being a vice principal or a senior teacher in another school, maybe looking for a new challenge by moving out of teaching altogether, maybe doing something still connected with education, but not in a school, or well, I don't know, there's all sorts of options out there. And from speaking to other teachers who are also well established in their careers as teachers, other people as well are unsure about what their next steps might be, or if they want to take any next steps. So it seems I'm not alone in wondering if my hopes and ambitions for my career lie in taking on new challenge, or just debating with myself, do I want to take on a new challenge that will inevitably see me moving further into managing adults and away from the classroom? Or is it equally ambitious and challenging to remain in the classroom, continuing in the role that I love and the main reason I wanted to become a teacher in the first place, which is sharing my passion for literature and languages with students and being there for them in difficult times, just like my teachers were for me? Teaching's far from easy. Any of us who have, or anyone who has any classroom experience can vouch for that. There's so much to manage. There's so much debate on the best way to teach and also how to deal with the myriad pastoral issues of the young people in front of you, that having the ambition of being the best teacher you can be is going to require huge amounts of time, energy, and dedication. So why then is it sometimes seen as a lack of ambition to stay in this area and focus on delivering the best possible outcomes for the young people, the students in our care? Well, Kathy McAllister has been teaching for some time now, and she's going to share with us her insights on this topic. I think, Kathy, you've already joined us there, haven't you?
Yeah, so like you, I am an English teacher in a high school, a non-selective high school. I am literacy coordinator, and I have been year tutor as well, which I recently um, hung up my year tutor post because it was just far too much work with the demands of being an English teacher. And I've been teaching for about 20 years. So yeah, I'm a bit of a long in the tooth teacher.
Presumably in your 20 years then, you've had opportunities to apply for different roles like the LitCo that you have now and like the tutor, the year head that you've been before. What made you want to go for those in the first place?
Well, I was year tutor initially because I really obviously enjoy pastoral. And that was something that I had always kind of hoped that I would be able to do. So when that became available, I was quite keen to do it. And I did do it for I think about 7 or 8 years. So I really enjoyed it. I was head of year 11. And like I said, just the support of the students and, working with them pastorally was something that I really did enjoy. So I really did enjoy that role. And then literacy coordinator came up, I think around about the same time, not long after that. And again, because that's obviously based in my subject, that was one that I'm really genuinely passionate about. And those things didn't take me away from my subject, which is my main passion. And so I'm working within my subject. So that's why I felt comfortable and quite confident with those roles. But I was still mostly have to step away from that, which is really where I think I know that's where my heart lies and that's where I want to be.
Yeah. Is that then, if opportunities for, say, moving up into a more senior leadership role came up, but it was taking you further away from the classroom, is that then why you maybe wouldn't be as interested in those sorts of roles?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember when I was on my very first day of PGCE many, many years ago, they did one of those dreadful, cringy icebreakers, which, I mean, as a teacher, when you hear the word icebreaker, you just want to like die. But I always find a person in the room who had, done this, that, or the other. And one of the things was find a person who wants to make it to principal. And I was so shocked by the amount of people who at that stage, they hadn't even started their teacher training and they were so certain they wanted to make it to principal. And I was just like, that wouldn't even be on my radar right now. I just want to get through this training and see how I feel in the classroom as a teacher. But I was really surprised that some people at that very early stage were so certain that that was for them. And I knew then the fact that that kind of appalled me a little, that it probably was never going to be for me. And I love the contact with the students. I always say when I close my door in my classroom, it's my little world, and I can set the tone and the atmosphere, and I can have it the way I want it to be, and I just love that, and I love engaging with the children, seeing them make progress, seeing them engaging in their learning. That's what gives me the most job satisfaction. And I think if I moved away into a more, upper leadership role where it's more administration and budgeting and managing adults, like you say, instead of students, I just don't think that I would get the same job satisfaction from that. I don't think that's where I am meant to be. I don't think that's where I will perform my best, So I think for me, that move up into upper management is not something I will ever do. I don't mind maybe doing like having a few points like I do, but I don't think anything beyond that would ever appeal to me. I know the classroom is where I want to be and that's where I want to stay, and I think I will stay there until I retire.
And that's the thing, really, isn't it? You've mentioned there, it's where you are going to perform at your best, and it's also where then you're having that contact with the children, you're seeing the progress, and that that's what's most important for you. So I suppose it's just sometimes emphasizing the value of that to new teachers coming in, to realize that that is equally as important. It's what what I certainly got into it for as well. I'm really surprised so many on day one of the PGCE were like, yep, principalship, that's where I'm heading. I didn't have a clue at that stage.
Yeah, it honestly just blew my mind. Like, so many were like, "Oh, definitely, I want to be principal." I was thinking, "Well, how do you know? You haven't even actually taught yet, you know?" But I think for some people, obviously, they are ambitious, but also some people, I think, like they like to think that they can push themselves, and that's great. You know, that like if you have that type of vision for yourself, but I'm not that kind of like, oh, I've got a 5-year plan or anything type of person. Like, status is nothing to me. Like, I don't care about status or titles or anything like that. I want to go to my job and enjoy it. And, as it stands as a classroom teacher of English and English literature, I enjoy what I do. I never like dread a class or think, oh no, I've got such and such a class coming now. Like, I look forward to seeing them all, and I would hate to lose that contact with the students.
Let's see what you're talking about there, the things that give you that job satisfaction. And also, yes, that it is great that there are people who want to go into the senior leadership roles, because we do need good people leading our schools.
Absolutely.
That's something that we are going to come back and talk about in a bit more detail in a minute. We're going to have a quick pause to hear the news for this week. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about that job satisfaction and where that can come from in different ways. And just looking at this from a few different perspectives so that we realize it's not just one way into teaching and staying in teaching for the long term.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading. Introducing My New Term, the revolutionary technology application connecting schools and candidates directly. Whether you're a school seeking to streamline your recruitment process or a candidate searching for your next role in education, My New Term has the solution. Developed by a former teacher, the technology at My New Term now connects tens of thousands of candidates with schools every month by digitizing the recruitment process. As a candidate, you can search for jobs, set up recommended jobs, and save time by applying directly to schools via a standardized online process. No more completing manual and repetitive application forms. Employers can streamline processes and save time utilizing the leading applicant tracking system for schools and multi-academy trusts. Recruitment in education has been broken for too long. My New Term is on a mission to change just that. Visit mynewterm.com to learn more, search all the latest opportunities, or schedule a demo. My New Term, shaping the future of education recruitment.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
This week on Teachers Talk Radio News, the King's speech at the state opening of Parliament outlined Labour's legislative programme for the year ahead, with 32 bills, including an ambitious education bill, the provisions of which will come into effect in late 2025. These include extending the national curriculum to all schools, including free schools and trusts, a statutory requirement for a curriculum review, qualified teacher status for all teachers. Currently there are 17,000 teachers who are unqualified and working in schools. Multi-academy trusts to be inspected by Ofsted. A register of all children not in school. Breakfast clubs will become a legal requirement, and the cost of branded uniforms to be capped. Also this week in the news, many students, parents and teachers will be delighted to hear the news that the UCAS personal statement is to be abolished. Joe Saxon, Chief Executive of UCAS, announced that the end of the personal statement was to open doors of opportunity and encourage applicants from disadvantaged backgrounds. Professor Lee Elliott Major, the Professor of Social Mobility, described this as a significant step to make admissions a little bit fairer. However, a number of critics pointed out that the UCAS personal statement is to be replaced by 3 questions, which almost exactly replicate the structure and content of the current UCAS personal statement. This week, All Saints Academy in Dunstable had lost its appeal to the High Court in its judicial review of its Ofsted inspection. 2 inspections, relatively close together in time, came to very different conclusions about the school. This led to them questioning the methodology and appealing for the criteria to be revealed. Mr. Justice Kavanagh, in his judgment against the school, indicated that all such judgments must contain a degree of subjectivity, and that the High Court was not the proper place to settle matters of public policy. These should be left to politicians. Some legal analysts, while agreeing overall with the role of the courts, have pointed out that, of course, this judgment itself contains a high degree of subjectivity. Labour's new Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, has announced that term-time holiday fines for absence from school are to continue. They are here to stay. She stated that parents should honour their responsibilities and recognise the importance of attendance in schools, and that it was necessary to have some deterrent and consequences. Parents groups have pointed out the cost savings of taking children on holiday in term time far outweigh the current fines, and that largely this remains a tax on poor families. In the school year 2022 to 23, permanent exclusions reached a record high, up 44% on the year before to 9,376. School suspensions were also up 36%. Beth Prescott, education lead at the Centre for Social Justice, said, "These are truly shocking figures, with both school exclusions and suspensions at new record highs, combined with a crisis in school absence with the so-called ghost children at near record levels. 1 in 5 kids persistently absent. There's a pressing and immediate emergency unfolding across our schools." This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with John Gibbs. Thank you for listening.
Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Okay, welcome back. I'm with Kathy McAllister this evening, an English teacher and literacy coordinator here in Northern Ireland. And we're talking about how there are different routes that you can take in your career path and the merits and challenges in each one of those, whether you decide to stay in the classroom or move up and out into senior leadership and management. And I wanted to move on to think about some of the reasons why people possibly go into those roles in the first place and want to go up into leadership and management. And for me, part of it, I suppose, as well comes from the fact that we have a massive gender pay gap in teaching. And I find it quite shocking whenever I first sort of looked into it. And I know this has been the case for a while. But last year, in November last year, the National Governance Association said that it's in some cases getting worse. You know, they've said that the gap starts to increase from teachers between men and women aged 35 to 39, nearly doubles in the next bracket, 40 to 44, and by 60 plus, it's over 15,000. And that report was saying that there's the worst male-female gap between secondary head teachers in 12 years when the workforce is overwhelmingly female. So I suppose a part of me perhaps felt that as an additional pressure to go into school leadership. And I teach in an all-girls school and I want them to see that representation in their school leadership as well. But at the same time, I don't want to feel like I'm being pushed into it just because that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be the best person for it. I want to go into it because I feel passionate about it. And there's reasons why I might, and I did really enjoy bits of SLT when I was on there. But it's kind of a tricky one that way for me as well. And I know that if I move back into that, it'll mean giving up to some extent the relationships that I have with my students, which would just, I don't know, for me, I think at the minute anyway, that would be too much of a wrench. I mean, I'm sure we've got lots of stories about times whenever our students have just done things that we know will stay with us forever, either really just lovely things or funny things or whatever it might be, or when someone's finally got something and you're like, yes, you've used that apostrophe without me telling you. Or, well, you know, do you know, or do you know what? Things like, I had a sixth former one time, just like while I was teaching a class, this knock on the door and a head just sort of poked round, and this sixth former just leaned her head in and went, well, Miss KS, are you okay? And I was like, I'm holding up, but it's difficult. And she was like, we just thought we'd better check in. And it was because Bowie had died.
Oh.
You know, and she just wanted to, she was like, I knew you'd be upset. Just wanted to check in. Are you all right? It's like, okay, I just don't imagine if I was a principal that she'd be coming up those stairs to tap on the door. Maybe she would.
Yeah.
Do you know, like wee things like this,
I mean,
or, you know, a
those
student.
wee moments are just, they make it, you know, like I remember the same when Bowie died, and then Alan Rickman died, like within a few days, I think it was. And like
Yes.
some of my kids, I hadn't heard, and then I had my year 12 after lunch, and they were like, Miss, you don't know, do you? I was like, no, because I was in really good form, and then they broke the news to me, and I was absolutely devastated, as were they, you know. But it's those wee thoughtful things, or like one of my girls was in Liverpool, and she knows I love the Beatles, so she brought me back, you know, like Yellow Submarine memorabilia and stuff like that. And I just don't think that, yeah, like you say, they probably wouldn't knock the door of the principal and be like, I brought you like a George Harrison figurine, you know. It's kind of like, you know, that's what I really love, you know. But I do get what you're saying about feeling the pressure to represent women as well, you know, because I mean, a big part of the reason why a lot of women find leadership so tough, I think, is because so many do have children, which I have chosen not to have children. So I did feel that little bit of pressure of, you know, I don't really have that excuse either. You know, like I've known people who have gone to leadership and have found it so much harder because they're trying to balance that with, you know, toddlers at home. And, you know, it's such a difficult thing to balance. And I have so much respect for people who can teach and be parents, because I can't imagine coming home and starting, you know, to be a parent after a day of giving 100% of myself to my students. I feel like my own kids would probably be getting about 70% of me if they were lucky. So I kind of see what you mean. You want to represent for women, and I kind of felt like, you know, I don't really have a really good excuse to say I don't want to push myself forward. But then I just think I always do what makes me happy, and I know being in the classroom really does make me happy. And I think, you know, like you say, being an all-girl setting, that pressure to be a good role model, and I would totally feel that if I was you. You know, they should see women in leadership. But then I think again in the classroom, you can still be a great role model as well. You know, you can show them, like I've had girls say to me, you know, that, you know, you did show me that, you know, women could do whatever they wanted and things like that. And that's from me just being in the classroom that they've, you know, felt that. So I think you still can do that. But I totally agree with, you know, what you're saying about trying to represent for women and close that pay gap, because obviously so many women work part-time, and that impacts the pay gap even more. And, you know, it is a hard thing to kind of feel, should you step up and, you know, represent for women on leadership. But absolutely, if that's what's going to make you happy. But for me, I don't think that was what's going to make me happy, you know.
I don't know that I would be a particularly good leader if I wasn't happy. Which, you know,
yeah, exactly.
What sort of an example would I be setting there either? Feeling like it was something that I should do, so I did it, as opposed to this is what I want to do, so I chose to do it.
Yeah. But I mean, I think you would probably grow into it. But I love being in the classroom so much that I just know I would really miss it. You know, it's just like sometimes, you know, if you have a certain class on a certain day, I'm sure you're the same. You actually kind of look forward to their crack, and, you know, what are they going to be coming up with today? What stories are they going to be telling you? And, you know, I would just miss that contact, I think. And, you know, I think there is nothing wrong with your ambition, like you said at the beginning, your ambition to be a brilliant classroom teacher. You know, that that was my ambition. I just love the teaching and the learning and having the students in front of me and building those relationships. And I do get so much enjoyment out of that. And I know that's what makes me a good teacher, where, like you say, I don't know that I would be a good leader because I might feel more stressed and out of my depth. And, it's not really a role that suits my personality. Like, I'm quite a warm, empathetic type of person. And I know as a leader, inevitably you're going to have to take some tough decisions. And I think I would really struggle. Like, I know that's why I never would have fitted in the business world, because you have to sometimes be, very pragmatic and take decisions that are difficult but necessary. And I think that I would find that really tough. Like, I've been in situations where I've seen colleagues have to be made redundant, for example. And I felt so bad that our management had to make that decision. And I just would struggle so much with that. It's those kind of things I think would make me probably not a very good manager, because I probably wouldn't be able to do it.
But then we want managers as well that are warm and empathetic to
Oh
be
yes,
in
and I
those
think I
roles
think I think
too.
I think you can be warm and empathetic and still make those hard calls, because I mean I've like I say, I've seen it happen. Like, I've had lovely managers who've had to do that, but I just feel like I'm sure it was such a horrible emotional burden for them, having to bring someone in and tell them
Yeah.
there's redundancy and you're in danger. Like, it's such a horrible conversation to have with a valued staff member, and that's a level of stress I just don't think that I would be willing to take on.
So that's one of the things that my husband Mark has talked about before, where he has, when I've been debating whether or not to go for certain roles, there have been times when he's kind of looked at me and gone, okay, but that means you're going to have to do more of the bit that you don't always like and that causes you stress, and less
Yeah,
of the things that you come home and talk about.
that's exactly it. And like you say, we need good leaders and we need the people that can make those hard decisions while also being empathetic and warm and approachable. But I don't know that I would be able to get the balance between the warm and approachable and then the making the tough decisions. I'd probably just be like, how am I going to decide this? Or, if it was something that was going to hurt someone, or, I just would really struggle with that. But I know someone has to do it, but I'm just kind of like, thank goodness it's not me. I just have to decide, whether to get cross because wee Johnny forgot a pen again or something. It's like, I'll just stick with that.
Yeah, and I mean, we have to do those difficult conversations at time already in middle leadership, and I feel like I get enough of those.
Yes, it's hard enough sometimes, the difficult conversations, and I just don't see myself wanting to willingly put myself out there for, more things that are going to stress me out and cause me to not go to sleep at night, because there's already enough things, you know, causing me to feel like that. And, I do think, you know, staying in the classroom in itself in the current climate is actually a bit of an achievement. When you look at the retention in teaching at the minute, it's maybe not so much in Northern Ireland, but I know in England it's pretty bad. I actually saw on Instagram earlier. I don't know if you follow Mr. P, Teach ICT with Mr. P. I'm a big fan of him, but
I
he was
have seen
talking
him
about
on other platforms. I don't have Instagram, but yeah.
but he was actually talking about some article in the Guardian this week about retention, and I think he said that if within 2 years, 1 in 5 teachers leave the profession, and within 3 years, 1 in 3, and within 1 year, 1 in 10. So when I heard that statistic, I kind of thought, wow, having been in the classroom for nearly 20 years, I actually feel like that, maybe it is ambitious to even make it. Like, if people are leaving after
Yeah,
1 year or 5 years, that's crazy, isn't it?
that is. That's worrying, that stat.
Well, I think they only recruited something like, it was fewer than 300 new teachers in certain areas of England, and the amount of jobs they have available and the amount of staff they've recruited, like, basically if something's not done, there's just going to be a serious crisis. So it does make me think, yes, some people need to stay in the classroom, but like you say, we do need people to go into leadership as well. So if we don't have enough people to do both of those things, it is a very, very scary thought of the future of our profession.
It is. And I mean, I don't want to sound like we're running school leadership down, or like I'm trying to put people off going for it. It's crucial for schools to have good leaders who set that culture, and we all know the impact that a great leader can have. And I've been lucky enough to work with some brilliant principals and vice principals and senior teachers, and they make such a huge difference. It's just, as you say, making sure we've got people in the classrooms too, and making sure that we show that teachers are valued. I remember seeing just the other day a tweet on Twitter, or X, I suppose we should call it now, that there was someone who had been teaching for 38 years, had the opportunity to apply for promotions, didn't take them, and at the end of 38 years left, and there was just a card. There was no sort of
goodness.
acknowledgement from the school formally, or a school assembly or anything like that. And I just thought, that makes me
think, did they not apply for promotion because it wasn't a very nice school? Because that's pretty brutal.
Well, good point.
Like, after that amount of time, to not even get like a bit of a fanfare, like you say, is pretty wild. So maybe it was just not a particularly nice school to work in, if there was no one there that actually thought that it would be appropriate to mark the occasion. It just makes me wonder what type of environment it was. But like you say, we do need those good leaders, and I've worked for some outstanding leaders as well, and I've also maybe worked for some who maybe haven't been so good too. But at least they're willing to give it a go. And I think the right people moving in is important too. But I do sometimes worry that some people do move in too quickly. I think because there is obviously that pressure, and there maybe is fewer people now, that people are kind of climbing the ladder more quickly than they would have in the past. And sometimes I think it probably be more beneficial to have a few more years as a classroom teacher under your belt before you made the move, or the traditional go to middle management, then go to senior management, where I just have kind of witnessed more recently, maybe people going to senior management quite quickly. And I'm kind of thinking, at that stage in my career, where I was maybe only out for a few years, I definitely could not have coped with that level of pressure, or such a drastic move. I think you need time in the classroom to hone your skill as a teacher, and to learn and develop, and then hopefully you're ready to move up. But I think that's another thing that's happening again, probably more so in mainland UK than here in Northern Ireland. But I don't think we're quite as bad with the staffing crisis yet. But it's certainly changing. Like, it used to be here that you were spoiled for choice. Like, there was so many teachers looking for jobs, where that's definitely changing now in Northern Ireland. But I think a result of that is that some people are being rushed into roles that maybe they're not ready for and don't really want, but they feel, I've maybe the longest serving person in this department, but I've maybe only been here for 2 years, so there's that pressure, which, they really need supported as well. We need to make sure that people are supported as they climb the ladder, and not just rushed into it or panicked into it. I would have a little bit of worry about that as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point about people maybe needing that bit of extra support, especially if they are new into it. I mean, one of my previous guests became head of department in his first year as a teacher. He went straight from PGCE, and while an NQT, he was head of department.
Can you imagine?
And I just cannot imagine the stress now. No, I mean, my department, there's 5 of us, and we all get on great, but it's challenging. There's a lot to do. The idea of the state I was when I first started teaching, trying to cope with things that would be coming up as a head of department, I would have crumbled if I might have left teaching if I'd gone in that early.
Never mind manage other people. Insane.
And that's, do you know what? In terms of the experience and having that wealth of experience that can help you in these things, I think that's also part of why we need to look. I'm the same as you. I've chosen not to have children, but I look at my colleagues who are parents in awe. And at times I do think, do you know what, like anybody who can manage to get small children or teenagers up, washed, dressed, left off where they're supposed to be with the stuff they're supposed to have with them, and get themselves into work on time, they've got some serious skills that could be great in management.
Absolutely.
And they'll know as well parental concerns and where they're coming from, and be able to have some brilliant empathy and conversations and things that, it's great to look at ways we can get more parents into leadership as well. I have some skills other people don't have. Parents have some skills that I don't have. And I think sometimes they're not always seen as being such great leadership skills that they are.
Well, I've got another very sad statistic for you because in that same Guardian article that I referenced earlier, apparently the largest cohort who are leaving education are women aged 30 to 39. So that's a bit depressing.
Yeah, see, it is, and I'm not even surprised because I'm sure we've all seen it so many times.
Absolutely, because I
Only,
have colleagues
we're
who have young children, and like you say, I just think they're almost like superheroes because what they're going home to deal with after sometimes a challenging day in school. And I just think I can barely manage myself and like a dog and a cat. Never mind going home to like toddlers and
yeah,
you know, or homework or getting uniforms and pack lunches ready and bedtime routines and oh my goodness, it's just crazy. So you can kind of understand why that is the cohort who are most likely to quit teaching, women 30 to 39, and a lot just go on maternity and don't come back or come back very reduced hours. So I suppose to some people leadership just seems like, yeah, no thanks, not right now. I am up to my eyes here.
yeah, which is understandable entirely. I mean, one of the reasons I became a teacher in the first place was my former English teacher. And you know what? I was at a conference talk thing one time in Belfast, and there was a woman got up to speak about a teacher who had really inspired her and led her to go into teaching. And then she asked, if there were any questions, and I put my hand up and went, "Would that be Suzanne Frizzell by any chance?" And she went, "Yes," because as soon as she started talking about her, I was like, "That's my old English teacher. I can just tell straight away." And she didn't go straight into teaching. She had her kids first, and she told us all as pupils and continued telling her pupils. And when I was a colleague as well, she told us that she spent her 21st birthday party or her 21st birthday pregnant with her massive swollen ankles up on a cushion going, "Yep, I'm happy with my choices." And I think it gave her so much confidence. She knew exactly who she was. She knew what her priorities were. Her priorities were her family first and foremost, but she then went and did her PGCE and went into a career as a teacher with small children at the same time. And she ran the community service program that I then took over. She established links with different care homes for the elderly, a special needs school that are still running over 30 years later and things, because
Love it.
she didn't look to progress in a certain way that was to do with status or anything like that. She just looked to see, what am I going to be brilliant at and what would I like to bring in for these kids, and then just did it.
That's
I
a
think
lovely
having a
way to look
different
at it.
path into teaching was brilliant.
Yeah, that's a more organic way of just kind of happened, and that would probably be my approach. I just kind of go, whatever will happen, and let's just deal with it when it does, kind of thing. Where, like I said earlier, that first day of PGC, when some people had like mapped out their future, I was just kind of like, people really do this? They actually think like in 10 years, this is where I want to be. Where I was just thinking like, I just want to teach English, and I haven't really thought anything beyond that. And I don't know that I am a very ambitious person, so maybe that's why that wasn't in my mind, where other people clearly had very much thought about it. So I suppose it's just different strokes for different folks. Like I really admire anybody that will push themselves into leadership. If it's what they want to do, then I say go for it. But like you said in your intro to this show, sometimes staying in the classroom can be seen as not ambitious. And I just think that needs to change because, you know, being a good teacher, having good classroom management, good relationships, good teaching and learning, all of those things, some people make it look really easy, but we know it's not easy. So I think there's no shame in just your ambition being to be, I want to be here and I want to make a difference in these children's outcomes. And, I'm happy it's enough for me. I think that should be okay for your ambition just to be, I want to be a really good classroom teacher. And that's enough. That should be okay. And that if other things come up or you have other ideas as time goes on, you might change your mind. That's okay too. I think you should just be able to kind of organically do what you want to do and what works for you in your situation. And there should be no barriers to people who do want to push themselves, but there really should be no pressure maybe for people who are just happy enough to stay where they are as well.
Yeah, I think that's very similar to the way that I would look at it too. It's making sure that we're removing the barriers for the people who do want to go into it, but also celebrating different ambitions that people have. I mean, one of the things that I do, I am a tutor on a course for teachers who are wanting to apply for middle leadership roles. And when I introduce myself at the beginning, you can see some people only switch on when I tell them that I was on SLT for a couple of years, even though most of what I can offer them in terms of advice or help or talking them through things comes from my experience as a teacher or as a head of department, not from whenever I was on SLT. But there are definitely some people that only, it's almost like it legitimizes me in their eyes in some way of like, okay, well, I'll take career advice from her because she has actually been up there, but it's a bit dodgy that she's not there anymore. Has something gone wrong there? Do you know?
I totally agree. Like,
I would like it being valued.
Yeah, it's, like you say, they perk up more when you say, oh, I have been on SLT. It's like, well, now I can listen to you. I've got something to learn from you. Or, I just think people have to be more open. I feel like I can even learn from my students, and I learn a lot from them all the time, and you have to be more open to that idea that, you don't have all the answers. And I think there is a bit of a danger sometimes, if you did have, a school that maybe wasn't particularly being led by the best management. While I really rate management, I don't want to sound like I'm, saying that everybody's a bad manager, but we know that there are some bad managers out there in all walks of life, not just in education. And, I think sometimes people have a really big skill set and it's just not being utilised. I'm sure in schools there's teachers who are excellent practitioners who have a wealth of expertise and years of knowledge and classroom practice that they could share, but that barrier might be there to them because they're not on middle management or they're not on senior management, and they might not be called upon to share things with staff where really they should be, because there's a lot that people could probably learn from some people who just sit quietly at the back and don't say anything and don't push themselves forward. And it's a real shame. I think a good leader will recognise the wealth of expertise among their staff and utilise it, but I worry that maybe not so good a leader might miss that opportunity, and some people are probably not being used as well as they could be in many settings, not just schools.
I think you're absolutely right. And actually that links in quite well with a show that I did before with 2 student teachers, where we were looking to see what can established teachers learn from them. And they had a lot of great ideas to share. We're going to have a quick pause, and when we come back, we're going to think about where this applies in other fields as well as teaching and what other types of ambitions people might have as well. So we'll be back in just a sec.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading. Introducing My New Term, the revolutionary technology application connecting schools and candidates directly. Whether you're a school seeking to streamline your recruitment process or a candidate searching for your next role in education, My New Term has the solution. Developed by a former teacher, the technology at My New Term now connects tens of thousands of candidates with schools every month by digitizing the recruitment process. As a candidate, you can search for jobs, set up recommended jobs, and save time by applying directly to schools via a standardized online process. No more completing manual and repetitive application forms. Employers can streamline processes and save time utilizing the leading applicant tracking system for schools and multi-academy trusts. Recruitment in education has been broken for too long. My New Term is on a mission to change just that. Visit mynewterm.com to learn more, search all the latest opportunities, or schedule a demo. My New Term, shaping the future of education recruitment.
Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Okay, we're back with me, Amanda, and Kathy McAllister's on with me tonight, and we've been talking about ambition and how that can look different in different roles in education, in the classroom, outside the classroom. And Kathy, you'd mentioned how this is something that applies in other fields as well, and I completely agree. My cousin, who we both know, is she works for a major charity, and I remember before when I was considering whether to step up into middle leadership. And I said I was a bit worried about how, I love being in the classroom and I don't really want to move away from that. And she was talking about how you need to look and see at times where you can have a bigger impact, and that in moving up and taking on roles that you might not initially think are for you, you can actually end up having a bigger impact and can make bigger changes for students. But obviously you lose the instant gratification of being in the classroom. And it can be exciting going up into those roles. So it's clearly something that happens in other departments as well. Selfishly, I don't know if I want to give up that gratification of being in the classroom. The idea that the students come in and I can be in a bad mood or low about something, and more than 9 times out of 10, they just turn you around straight away. They'll come out with something daft or some question that you've never thought of before in your life, or they'll have a song recommendation for you or a book recommendation or whatever. Whether it's a student doing a presentation and you see in their planning that they've written in their notes that King Billy won Wimbledon 3 times in the 1970s, and you have to lean over and go, no, love, that's Billie Jean. It's not the same person.
Oh, I love it.
Thing that I just think, it just like that just doesn't happen elsewhere. I love that we have these ridiculous stories from teaching that you just don't get elsewhere, and I would miss those so much. But there's also the idea of having different types of ambitions. If someone's ambition is to focus on their family first, I 100% respect that too.
Absolutely.
And then there's my husband Mark, who works for the NHS, and like when he was band 4 and a band 5 post came up, everybody just assumed he would be going for it, and he would just look up and go, nope, not interested, and then he would go for one that came up that did engage his interest, but he wouldn't just apply for something because it was there. And I think
yes, he wasn't going for the status of having a higher role. It was actually because this role engaged his interest rather than he wants a promotion to any promotion.
Exactly.
It's like,
yeah.
And that's a bit like, I wanted my literacy coordinator or my year tutor because it appealed to me as a teacher and the skill set that I have. But there's other, promotion things that have come up that I wouldn't even read the ad on the board because I just know that's not for me. It wouldn't pique my interest the same way. I mean, really, these days my ambition is just to get home to my dog and have a bit of a cuddle on the couch and a nice cup of tea because, I mean, I'm just getting old now, and that's as exciting as life gets.
I think that's an excellent ambition to have, but
I mean, I know you share this ambition.
I absolutely share this ambition. But my ambition is to be happy and have that work-life balance. And I've tasted a bit of both sides of it, and I think I'm going to be happier having the space. Like if I was going forward and being a vice principal or principal, would I have the time to do this? Maybe not. Over the summer, would I have time to go off on camper van adventures, or would I still be doing planning and budgeting for next year?
I mean, that's just, if you can't get away in the camper van, then like that's the deciding factor for me. If I can't get away in the van, I'm not taking it. Like that's the yardstick by which it's all going to be measured against, isn't it? But being serious, what you were saying about your cousin, who I also know very well, I think that's a very sensible, pragmatic approach. That was good advice that she did give you, and it is so true. It definitely is so true. But knowing her and knowing her very well for like 30 odd years, I know that she is able to really look at things in that very pragmatic, practical way, and she can be a very much of a head person rather than a heart person, which is so good. But as I said earlier, I think I'm a real heart person sometimes. And I know that, your cousin has had to make some of those difficult decisions that I talked about earlier that I think I personally would probably be struggling and find quite stressful. But I know she's had to do things, and while she hasn't found it easy, she's like, it's necessary and it's part of my role, and she can be just so practical about it. And that's just something like that I don't think I have. And maybe that is like a real leader. She's a great leader. in her job. She is a great leader. And although it's not teaching, I know that she does a great job in leadership, and I've seen her in many leadership roles doing a great job. And I think it's maybe as well that she has more of a personality for it than I do. But it's maybe myself selling myself short and telling myself I don't have the personality for it. Maybe if I push myself, I would find that I do, but I'm maybe more in my comfort zone. And it's maybe a bad thing as well, when we're looking at the balance of, is it a good thing to not be ambitious? I mean, maybe sometimes you do need to push yourself out of your comfort zone more, and maybe that's something I haven't done, and I can't admit that.
But I suppose then it comes back to the reasons of why you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, because you'll have had challenges and things to deal with in the roles that you've already got.
That's so true. It's like teaching every day is different, and that's why I love it. I went into teaching quite late as well. Like I didn't go straight in from university. I worked for a few years. I went in when I was in my late 20s, and it's the first job I've stuck at. Every other job usually had a 3-year expiry date for me because I got bored. I could do the job in my sleep, and it was dull. It bored me. For teaching, I've never reached that stage, and that's why I know I love being in the classroom, because I think if I needed more, I would be feeling like, okay, I should be, climbing the ladder, but I don't feel that. I haven't got to the stage where the same thing is starting to bore me or it's too easy. It's a different challenge every single day. Every single child, every single class brings a different set of challenges, and it keeps you on your toes, but it does keep it interesting. Like there's never a dull moment, like you're always busy, you're always challenged, you're always thinking, you know, and I think that's what I love about the classroom environment. I know that I haven't got bored there, and that to me speaks volumes, because I know I'm the type of person that once a job becomes too easy, I will go, okay, I'm ready for something new. And I've never reached that stage with basic classroom teaching of English. I still love it every day. I still thrive on it.
And that's why I think it needs to be valued as an ambition, staying in the classroom itself. Like everything that you've just said there just so fully resonates with me as well. Thinking about you are challenged and you're pushed, and there's different things to deal with and difficult things sometimes pastorally that will come up with students that
Yeah.
you have to try to find a balance with, and not taking some things home with you mentally and then physically, with all of the work needing to be done as an English teacher and all of the marking to be done. Like there's no time to get bored, and it does change with each different class and child that comes in. So I suppose, yeah, there's plenty there to keep us interested, and as you say, that this is something that is working for you, or you wouldn't still be doing it 20 years in. I didn't realize it was 20 years. That's phenomenal. So clearly something's going right.
Yeah, I do enjoy it. And, I'd very rarely wake up and go, oh no, I have to go to work, unless I'm not feeling well or something. If I'm not 100%, I might go, oh no, this is going to be a tough day because my head's sore or whatever. But generally, if I wake up feeling well, like I just get in the car and go, and to me, that's a really good sign that I know I do still have the passion and enthusiasm for it. And I think once you lose that, you know, it probably does become a more difficult job, and I'm just so thankful that, 20 years later, I still do have that enjoyment, and, that I still have the passion for doing it. Like, people will be saying to me even now, oh, you'll be back to school now in a couple of weeks, and, all that kind of thing, where people love to talk about teachers' holidays. Like, it's the only thing they like to talk about when it comes
Mhm.
to teaching. And, if people like almost look shocked, if like when it gets to August, they say, oh, you're back to work soon. Oh, I'm sure you're dreading it. And I kind of go, no, not really. Like, especially once the students come back, like sometimes those days where it's lots of meetings and data, that can be a wee bit straight in, after like a couple of weeks off. But as soon as the classes come back, I'm just like, I'm here and back, and I'm always happy to see them and hear all their chats and, have a good catch up with them. And, you know, like I think people are quite shocked whenever you actually don't respond with going, oh no, I don't know how I'm going to go back. I can't face it. That's what they think you're going to say, but you're kind of like, actually, no, I don't mind going back. I've had a good rest. I feel refreshed. I'm ready. It's like I always say to my classes, especially high school teachers, like, or secondary as we are, people who aren't teachers think that it is a hellscape, like taxi drivers and things when they say, oh, what do you do for a living? And you say teacher. And I always get the primary, with a really sweet wee look, and you go, no, secondary, and they look appalled, like they actually visibly wince. And then, like, they say things like, I don't know how you stick it. I would have them all killed. How do you cope when you're not allowed to hit them anymore? They
Yeah.
need to bring back the cane. These are the kind of conversations people have with me when
So
I say
many
that.
people say that.
And I mean, I tell my students, like, we're talking about teenagers, and I say to them, do you guys realize how some people in society regard you? Because that's crazy. And like, I'll tell them anecdotes like that, and they'll just be like, what? They're laughing. But I'm like, people actually think the schools are just full of feral children, and teachers who are all at their wits' end, and they're all having, like anxiety constantly. And kind of like, it's just not like that. I mean, maybe it is. I don't want to obviously downplay it or oversimplify it. If some people might be really struggling. We've all had times where we struggled, but generally most teachers love teaching. And the perception that other people have, I think, is that we just we don't really like it, that we live for holidays, and that when we're there we're just so stressed all the time. And yes, there are stresses. My stresses though were things like workload, keeping on top of my marking, making sure I get that GCSE classes work back to them in a good time frame so that I can move on and they've had the feedback. Those are the things that stress me out. But it's never actually the contact with the students. That's the most enjoyable part of the whole thing, because they do, like, they make you laugh, as you've said. I just think if I wasn't a teacher, I probably wouldn't understand, references like current memes and, sayings that the people use. I just feel like the students have kept me relevant, like I know all these pop culture references that there's no way I would know if I wasn't a teacher.
I do not, and my students find it hilarious, but that's fine.
I mean, I probably don't, but then they tell me, then I do.
Oh no, yeah, I'm just thinking of there are times when they'll say things that be like, what are you actually saying? But yeah, it is. It's all these things, all these experiences that we wouldn't get. And you're right, I would feel the same way. The things that cause me the stress, it's very rarely the students themselves. And that doesn't mean that there aren't sometimes really testing times or challenging behaviours. There are, of course there are.
Oh,
but,
yes.
It's not the majority of the time. The majority of the time when you're actually teaching, that's the bit that I still get excited about. I mean, whenever I was at, I managed to get the holy golden grail of, I was able to go to a wedding during term time, and it was in Spain. It was sunny.
I mean,
I know.
There's some good leaders right there.
I was doing work for the Education Authority, so I had a sub day, and I was like, if I make this up at another time, would I be able to use it? It was very, very early in the year, you see, so that it wasn't like a normal full teaching time. Yeah. And they were like, yes, no problem. So I was able to go, and when we were there, Mark was saying to me, do you know, if you gave up your points, or maybe went down to 4 days a week, we might be able to do this sort of thing more often. And I was like, oh my goodness. And like another guest I'd had on before, another Amanda, she's a head of biology and she works 4 days a week. And now I'm kind of going to ramp up the time that I get to do stuff like that, and look forward to a point where I can give up the points that I've got at the minute, and maybe going part-time might be an ambition that I have in the future, which is never something that I would have thought that I would be wanting to do for a long time. But sometimes just having different experiences make you reevaluate what some of your ambitions are.
As you age, your ambitions definitely change as well. Like I never would have thought about part-time either, but as like I'm now in my 40s, as I creep towards 50s, it is something that maybe I think, well, maybe those last few years of my teaching career, I could go down to like, 4 days or whatever. Like one of my colleagues has just done that, like she talked about it for a few years, and now she's decided to give it a try for a year to see, how she feels about it. And I know that she's gonna love it, and she'll never be back to 5 days. I can just tell. But she's just at that stage now where, like you say, her priorities have changed, her ambitions have changed. It's like that kind of thing, like having a little bit of time to enjoy yourself with loved ones. It does become more important, I think, as well. And that's, it maybe doesn't seem like an ambition, but in such a busy job, thinking about the possibility, like, like Mark saying to you, like, if you work part time, we could do things like this more often. You don't even think about that as a possibility. Then when someone just puts it out there, you're just like, could I? It's just not something you ever consider. But I think as you get older, you do start to think differently. Like, I've never thought about it, but until more lately, like the last maybe 2 years or so, those kind of thoughts have started to come on to me as well, where I don't think, I could go like drastically part time, like 2 days or 3 days, but I could maybe think about dropping one day, and that would be quite nice, to have an extra day to like get caught up on things or whatever you need to do. It's definitely something I think a lot of people start to consider at a certain stage in their career.
What I find unexpected for me recently was my mother-in-law died there at the end of May. And I found myself really reevaluating my ambitions when it came to work and thinking of, do I want to go back into those sort of senior roles, or am I going to be happier just focusing on being in the classroom? And that for me has made me sort of reevaluate things as well and think, do you know what? My mother-in-law is someone who worked and then stopped working when she had kids and then went back part-time. But she always focused on whatever she wanted to do that she knew was going to make her happy. She was a really strong woman. She just, and like when she worked in a shop and the manager spoke to her poorly, she turned on her heel and left and never walked back into the shop, and no one in her family dared go near that shop again because their name was mud. Do you know what I mean? She didn't feel the need to do what people necessarily thought she should do. She went with what she knew was right for her. And I found myself thinking, do you know what? Am I just trudging along this path because that's the roadmap that we're given at the start? Or is it actually something that excites me? It did before, but I don't know if it excites me anymore. So why would I be still pushing myself along those lines if it's not what I'm necessarily into at the minute?
Yeah, and I think whenever you have something like a bereavement, it does make you really reevaluate. Like things like that always do. You look at that person's life, how they've lived your life, you think about how you're living your life. Are you getting the most out of it? And as you say, most importantly, are you doing what's making you happy? And I think when something like that happens, it does make you focus maybe on things that you put in the back burner all the time, like self-fulfillment or well-being. You're always just so busy. But I think something like a loss like that does trigger that in you. You do start to think, should I just do what makes me happy? And I think you maybe can have that more honest conversation with yourself about what actually will make me happy. And at a time like that, you're maybe more likely to be able to be honest with yourself and actually start to pursue what you really do want, rather than, like you say, what has kind of been laid out for you or what you should do. And your priorities might change. Like I said at the start, you were excited about the thought of climbing a career ladder, where now you're maybe thinking, actually, hold on a minute, it's not for me, and that's fine. Whatever is going to make you most content is what you should do.
Yeah, it's what you're saying. It's making me think of, I've a young friend who is an actor, and she's a former pupil as well from the very beginning of my career. And she lives mostly over in London now, but she was home for a bit, and I was leaving her off to the airport, and we were having a chat in the car on the way up about how I was trying to decide whether or not to apply for a vice principal's position that had come up. And I was asking her advice, and I was like, no, I'm thinking of going for this, but I don't know. I love my school, and I love being there. I love teaching English. I don't know if this is really what I want to go for, but equally it is interesting to me. So I was mulling it over, and she was my sounding board. And we got to the airport. That was grand. Off she went. She hopped off the other side when she got to London, and usually you get big long voice notes from her, so I got a message from her. But she was referring me to a quotation from the intro to a book I had given her a year or so. Anderson's Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, because it's amazing, and I knew she'd love it. And it's so good. So she had opened it, she had taken a picture of one of the early pages of the intro, and she'd sort of highlighted a big box around it, but she'd also then sent me a voice note of her reading this quotation out. And it's this. She says, this is Jeanette Winterson saying, I really don't see the point in reading in straight lines. We don't think like that, and we don't live like that. Our mental processes are closer to a maze than a motorway. Every turning yields another turning, not symmetrical, not obvious, not chaos either. A sophisticated mathematical equation made harder to unravel because X and Y have different values on different days. And my friend's argument was that X and Y also have different values to different people as well as on different days. So her argument was, while a person might be an incredible VP or a principal, they should listen to their passion. And if they're already great at engaging students and looking after them, that's equally valuable, and that each individual should take whatever steps and whenever it's right for them, and that might not mean taking the obvious route. It's not. I love that idea, but it's a maze, not a motorway.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, there's no guarantees, and it's not just a straight road with no obstacles that you can just see straight ahead. So I think that was really good advice from your friend as well, and former students, and there you did a really good job, clearly with that one. I mean, I'm sure her parents probably take credit for her, but I mean, I'm just going to give you the credit. But
all me.
It is
all me.
Yes, it was all English, all the English department. But it is so true, and it comes back to what we've said several times throughout this chat. It's what's right for you at that time, and I think that's so true, and you can always, try something, and if it's not for you, it's okay to say no. Actually, I'll just go back to what I was doing. So, if you wanted to apply for that VP post, you certainly can. You could, go for an interview if you got called for interview, and see how you feel until the point where you know in yourself, does this feel right for me? And then you just decide, and there's no shame in saying, actually, this is not for me. But likewise, there's no shame in saying, you know what, I'm gonna give it a go. I think, like you say, on the different days for different people, everything is so changeable. So, it's really, really good advice and a very pertinent quote.
Yeah, for someone, I think she was 25 at that stage. I thought it was most impressive of her. And plus, she had read the book that I had given her, so that was a bonus.
Most importantly.
Most importantly. But yeah, I think what you're saying there is really important too. And I think it's actually something that I was probably better at the beginning of my career, and that I also tell my students now when they're looking at careers, because I keep stressing to them, whether they're choosing GCSEs or A-levels or whatever it might be, or thinking about uni courses, or if they want to do something else entirely, that it doesn't have to be forever. You don't need to think about your career, one, as the most important thing in your life. And I think as teachers, we're quite bad for that, actually, of wrapping up our identity so closely with being a teacher, that you don't have to think, oh, I'm going to do this for the next 50 years or whatever. Like, you can, as you say, go for something, and then if you want to change your mind, you can change your mind. There's no shame in that. That's actually a brave thing to do, is to try something out, and if it's not right for you, having the guts to say so and maybe try something else.
And it's so hard, like you're saying, when they're trying to think about their future path. It's so hard at like 16, 17, 18. Like, I know at that point I had no idea what I wanted to do. And if someone had have told me at that stage that I would have been a teacher, I would have laughed, because it wasn't like I was one of these people that, had an ambition from I was 5 years old to be a teacher. I was quite shy and quite introverted and hated talking in front of people. But obviously it got easier as I got older and you got more confident and things like that. I mean, I still don't love talking in front of big groups, but I don't feel like teaching a class full of students. I don't feel like that is like a big group of like intimidating people or anything. It's weird. But I certainly wouldn't have thought if someone had told me at 17, oh, you'll be a secondary school teacher, I probably would have laughed because I would have thought, there's no way I could get up in front of other people. But that's because I was still a teenager myself. I just wouldn't have felt able to do that. Where when you're like 27, it's completely different getting up in front of a bunch of 16 or 17-year-olds. So, like I said, at that point, I wouldn't have thought that was for me, where now I absolutely love it. So, you just can't know like where you're going to end up and what's going to happen for you. And sometimes some of my students will, actually want to do teaching as well. And this, like I had a girl ask me recently, should I do the Bachelor of Education or should I do a degree then a PGC? And I was just kind of like, well, just do whichever one appeals to you more. Look into the course, find out what it involves. But I said personally, I preferred the degree PGC route because for me, it gives me more options. That if I decided teaching wasn't for me, then I had a more general degree that I could do something else with. And I mean, you still could with your BEd, of course, but it just for me that was always something that I kind of thought, I'm gonna have the English degree and then the teaching qualification as a separate thing. So I can keep my options open if I ever decide to just throw in the towel and become a dog
Yeah,
walker.
I feel
You
the
know,
same way. That's the real
that's the
ambition.
real ambition.
Um, that is. Well, I always say to my students, I specifically didn't want to be a teacher because my degree was English and Spanish. So everybody went, "Oh, are you going to be a teacher?" And I was like, "No, no, I'm not." And I tell my students my plan was to become a long distance lorry driver. That's what I wanted to do at the time. Mom was like, "Yeah, on you go if it means I don't have to pay for uni." And it's like, "No, I'm going to do uni first." So that I tell the girls that was what my plan was, and I tell them if I get bored, then you'll not see me for dust. I'll go and do something else. But realistically, the longer you've been in something, the scarier that feels to do. But I always tell them, you don't have to decide now. I didn't know until I did my degree in English and Spanish and spent a year in a Spanish high school as a language assistant. And then I was like, okay, nobody told me it was like this. This is amazing. This is definitely what I want to do. So I came back with a completely different ambition than I'd had whenever I went out. It changed utterly in that 1 year from having that experience. And if I hadn't had that, I could be doing something completely different now.
Exactly, and I feel that things happen for a reason. I do sometimes think, weird doors are opened for you that, sends you in a different direction, and it's kind of like, it was meant to be almost. But you know, what you say is so true. Like you thought, I'm definitely not going to be a teacher. I wouldn't have ever dreamed that I would be a teacher for the reasons I already said. But yet here we are. And the one thing I think that probably pushed us both into it is that love of our subject and the love of learning. Because I am just a super nerd. I love learning. I love being a student. This is the one thing. I would have stayed in education like till I was 50 if it was feasible, honestly. I just love like writing essays, reading, doing research. I am such a perpetual student. And I do think that teaching does allow you to kind of continue almost to be a student because you're always learning, you're always reading like the latest stuff or, educating yourself or, reading the new novel that you haven't maybe read that's been put on the spec or the new anthology for the GCSE poems or whatever it is. And I might not have heard of them all, so I need to teach myself them. And I kind of enjoy that as geeky as that sounds. I think that's why teaching ultimately really appeals to me because I love learning and I love being a student. And I think that's what suits me, where the move up into management becomes more of an administrative role as you leave the classroom more and more. And that's I just don't think that's my passion. I know that I would have just went back and done a master's, a PhD. I just would have kept going back and just doing course after course to stay a student. And like I suppose with hindsight, I should have known I would end up a teacher, but I never would have thought that. It wasn't my ambition. But when I actually align that with what I enjoy and what pursuits I would do just for pleasure, like reading and researching, I enjoy those things, and teaching just fits that so well. And that's why I think being in the classroom probably does just draw me in more than anything else, because I feel I am in that learning environment, and even though I'm not a student, I'm seeing like this body of students, and I'm feeding off that. I love that they're learning, they're progressing. I love, reading their essay. That whole world of education and learning is just, I've just always loved it. I've just always been like someone who loves being a student. So I suppose being a teacher is the closest thing to getting to be the perpetual student. Really, you get to stay in the educational environment indefinitely. You never leave school.
Sounds pretty excellent to me. Right, when we come back, we're going to have some final thoughts on this and on values and role models and ambitions and what we've been thinking about so far as a sum up.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading. Introducing My New Term, the revolutionary technology application connecting schools and candidates directly. Whether you're a school seeking to streamline your recruitment process or a candidate searching for your next role in education, My New Term has the solution. Developed by a former teacher, the technology at My New Term now connects tens of thousands of candidates with schools every month by digitizing the recruitment process. As a candidate, you can search for jobs, set up recommended jobs, and save time by applying directly to schools via a standardized online process. No more completing manual and repetitive application forms. Employers can streamline processes and save time utilizing the leading applicant tracking system for schools and multi-academy trusts. Recruitment in education has been broken for too long. My New Term is on a mission to change just that. Visit mynewterm.com to learn more, search all the latest opportunities, or schedule a demo. My New Term, shaping the future of education recruitment.
Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Okay, we are back with Kathy McAllister, and we've talked a lot tonight about some of the ambitions that people have going into teaching and how they might change over time and how we can see that in other careers as well. Do you know, I was at my nephew's graduation recently, just the other week, from studying art and game design, and there was a speaker there who said something similar to what we've been talking about, that he'd always planned on being an illustrator and ended up working in completely unexpected fields. And it led to him setting up this charity to help underrepresented groups have access to working in various media. So sometimes not following that signposted route in your career leads to something more satisfying. And I suppose it's just great to have an opportunity to talk about that, to maybe stress that to people who feel that they are under pressure to go down a certain route, that there's other options out there.
Absolutely. And, like I said before, I do tend to just go with the flow, and I'm a big believer in whatever's for you will not go by you. So I just always wait and see what's going to come up for me, and I'll see how it goes, kind of thing. And I know some people don't like that maybe more free flow approach and maybe do prefer a more structured, or people have their 5-year plan and their 10-year plan. But I think you have to be open to other things as well, like that. I want to be an illustrator, but now I'm doing something completely unrelated to that, but it's still in the area of the arts and creativity. So it's still obviously of interest to that speaker, so I think we just have to be open to opportunities and, possibilities that are there for us. And, it's maybe good to have a plan in mind, but also just be flexible with that. And, think, well, if something else comes up, I might, like you say, it's like a maze, just go like a different path and see where it takes me. And, I think that's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah, so I suppose that would be then, I'm stealing this advice from my young friend, and I'll claim this as my own and say, so this would be my advice then to people thinking about their careers. And at the beginning I was saying, I'm at that point where I am reevaluating what my ambitions are and looking to see, are they lying in this route? Are they lying in something different? And I had to answer this actually on a questionnaire recently whenever we were looking at career planning and things, and I was asked, so what do you see yourself doing in the future, or what are your career aspirations at the minute? And I just answered honestly and said, I don't know, but I do feel comfortable asking for help and advice once I do. And I'm lucky enough to have people like you and other people around me who I can ask for advice, and people from different fields as well, like my cousin, which really helps to get that external point of view at times as well. It can be really useful.
It's good to get a different perspective, because sometimes in teaching it can be like a vacuum, or maybe even an echo chamber where everybody's experiencing similar things, and sometimes it can be good to get maybe somebody who is more removed from the situation to give you a bit of advice. If you're kind of at a crossroads, or you're not sure, you have to make a decision. Obviously there's some things other educators will have insights to that are invaluable, and outsiders might not understand the school setting enough to give you good sound advice. But things like, should I apply for a promotion? Sometimes people outside might have a perspective that is more useful. So it is good to hear those kind of different voices, feeding in, and surround yourself with different people. I mean, I know for me, like my colleagues are, like, I just couldn't survive without my colleagues. As much as I've talked about how much I love the students, like my colleagues just, I think, are another big part in why I love my job, and maybe if I was in a different setting, in a different department with different colleagues, might not feel the same. I've been so lucky in the department that I'm in, that the people that I work with are incredible. And, I know we all support each other and advise each other. And I've had some brilliant advice from my close colleagues. And I know that, I've shared advice with them. And I just feel so thankful for those people who are there and can support me, who know me so well, who know my school setting so well, who know all of that. But also sometimes it's good to speak to people outside and, get their perspective as well, and then kind of balance it all up and look at everything you've heard, and make a decision that way.
Do just when you're speaking about your colleagues and the difference that can make, when I think about the role models that I have had, because if you're thinking about ambition, surely you need to think about your role models as well, because your ambitions will be intrinsically linked to the sort of people you respect, and whose views you appreciate, and who've helped. And for me, they have come from every walk. I've had amazing principals, vice principals. One in particular, who is now a principal elsewhere, she gave me loads of brilliant advice, made so much time for me. And my old principal, when I started off, I've like amazing people from SLT, but my colleagues as well, like my old English teacher, who very clearly did, cut her own path through things and wasn't interested in going down the obvious route, and struck up these connections with other schools and establishments that we never would have thought of without her. But I'm going to give a big shout out at the end here to someone who made a huge difference in my school life, which was our caretaker, who was the caretaker when I was a pupil, and who was so excited when he saw me coming in for my interview, and then whenever I got it. So, Billy, for me, made a huge difference when I was a pupil. But these are the sorts of people who made school somewhere I wanted to be as a pupil. My ambition is to be like people like that, like Mrs. Frizzell, like Billy. Whenever I then became a teacher in the school, anytime Billy saw me in the corridor, he'd go, "Number one, kid, number one." Or especially if he saw me looking a bit stressed, which especially in the early days I was, he'd go, "All right, kid, don't forget what Van said." And I'll not repeat what Van said, but it's about not letting certain people grind you down. It's, the same quotation from The Handmaid's Tale. So, people like that made my school experience as a pupil. They continue making it for me now as a teacher. And I think my ambition is really to be like that, to make school that kind of an experience for as many kids as I can. And I think that's
and you can do that
just as important and valuable and worthwhile.
And you can do that from the classroom or from leadership. That's the beauty of that. No matter what path you choose to go down, you could choose to create a culture that makes school a pleasant environment for everyone to be in, which is just such a great thing.
And I mean, I think that's probably the best sentiment to end on there, because what ambition could be better than that? Just making it the best experience that we possibly can. Surely that's why we got into this all in the first place.
I think so, and I think that's a great way to end on a nice positive note.
Nice positive note. Yeah, well, Kathy, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me tonight and sharing your experience, your wealth of experience there from 20 years of teaching. And I just think it's an important conversation to have, to show to people that ambition looks different. It looks different to different people. It looks different on different days. And you can have ambitions that go beyond the classroom, and it's okay not to follow the obvious sign-posted route. It's okay for it to be a maze and not a motorway. And I'm really glad that you came on tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, and hopefully the technical difficulties didn't last too long.
No, we got there. Well, thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll be on again next month. There are lots of great Teachers Talk Radio shows coming up this week as well. So be sure to keep tuning in. Thank you.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.